target is to transform our transportation system into an electric fleet. And we don't have enough in-state renewable power to support it without using this particular destructive tool. Can we not instead obtain what may be needed for additional power from across state or international lines? Do we have the transmission infrastructure in Vermont necessary to support added renewable electric generation? Clicker, number 4, Bob. Bob, you make a great minnow like that.
Oh, yeah.
He's not great.
Now, some of you, I've noticed, have already taken off the tabletops a series of photographs that were presented here today. I'm hoping every member of the press managed to get this. This is a Velco map. It's not my map. It was handed to me by Carrick Johnson a couple of weeks ago, demonstrating the transmission capacity in Vermont, where things are necessary and where things would be a real big headache if we tried to increase what's going on. For the purpose of this brief discussion, I would just ask you to take a look at the top of the state of Vermont that's in white. Bobby, can you read that, what it says on there?
The 2012 plan shows we're
Right where it's in the white spot on the map. Bring your bifocals.
generation in this region has reached its transmission capacity as of 2012.
And that's exactly where they're planning to build the Newark, Ferdinand, and Brighton power plant. Velco, by the way, will be testifying, as I understand it, on January 11th before the Governor's Siting Commission. And I understand Velco to be taking the position that, in fact, building in that area is not a good idea at this time. Build intermittent power, which is what this particular tool is. Can our utilities make safe predictions about power availability and reasonable price? If you believe the Vermont Electric Co-op's news conference last week, the answer is no, which is why they're supporting a moratorium on trying to add any additional intermittent power into their grid. Why we're all here. Obtaining the answers to these questions, formulating a state energy policy and an energy plan that incorporates these answers takes time. We shouldn't permit ourselves to be pressured by corporate, mostly out-of-state entities while we take that time. We shouldn't be allowing our cherished mountains, our cherished history, to be destroyed while we take that time.
Where's Beeper?
We shouldn't
Right over there.
involve ourselves in social upheaval while we take that time.
Yes, sir.
It is for that reason, ladies and gentlemen, that a bipartisan effort, not a small hand-picked group of legislators, according to one website I recently read, but a bipartisan effort is being made to make sure we back up the train, set the reset button, and redefine the conversation with Vermont's history and involvement in environmental proactivism involved in the discussion. I'd like to turn it over to another member of the Erin Brockovich fan club, Senator Robert Hartwell, who will talk about the bill.
I'm Senator Bob Hartwell from the Bennington District and have possibly the misfortune of having to follow Senator Bennett. His work on this problem and on the challenges we have here has been of inestimable value. And I'm pleased to work with him, and as he's pointed out, on a very bipartisan effort to address a series of problems we need to deal with there are a lot of other members of this legislature and a significant number of senators who will be working on this. There will be a number of other sponsors in the Senate of this bill. I want to talk about the bill in a moment, but part of my concern here, one of my primary purposes here, is that I really do believe that the process we're using here to deal with projects of this magnitude is seriously broken down.
Yes.
Years ago, before we ever heard about this, in 1970, as Senator Benning has pointed out, at the behest of Governor Davis, we enacted Act 250. That law is now about 43 years old and has worked, in my view, very well in regulating development and doing what is appropriate for preserving Vermont's landscape in a proper fashion while allowing responsible projects to go forward. A few years later, electric generation was taken away from Act 250 and put with the Public Service Board because there was concern about towns and other political entities interfering with the generation of enough power. That may have made sense at the time. To do that, in my view, it no longer makes sense. It is now a wholesale electric market. Utilities don't come to the Public Service Board looking for permits to build generating facilities, unless, of course, you have $44 million worth of tax credits that you want to use, so you use them on Laurel Mountain. Without those tax credits, Laurel would not have happened.
That's right.
That's right.
The tax credits, by the way, did not fall over the cliff on New Year's Day, so that makes our responsibility here, I think, all the more urgent. Our purpose is to put a process back in place, and we believe that essentially that is the Act 250 process, which will make regional planning commissions, select boards, planning commissions, neighbors, people affected, statutory parties to the proceedings, and their opinions taken seriously as part of the permitting process. That is seriously absent here. There is a misconception that Act 250 is being utilized effectively in the current process. It is not. It is considered, and you will see findings in the Public Service Board in the Act 248 proceedings that Act 250 criteria are being addressed. They may be addressed, but they're not really being honored. We need a process that has the statutory power and responsibility and participation that Act 250 has, and these are the kinds of projects. A few type of project has escaped the Act 250 process, and we need to put that back in. But there's more to this. What we propose to do with this bill is to do what Senator Benning has talked about this, is that we need to look at what it is we're really doing here. I think almost everybody thinks that there's a lot that's hopeful and positive about renewable energy and about the need to use less foreign oil and the need to have as clean an environment as we possibly can and reduce our carbon footprint. I haven't met very many people who are opposed to those hopes and those goals. In this case, there is evidence, and I don't know the answer to this completely. There's evidence that industrial wind is possibly exacerbating climate change. There is serious evidence that it's unnecessary. As we already know, there's diminished consumption of power, particularly in Vermont, and it looks like there will be throughout New England and the New England power grid. The question is, should we be doing this at all, given those factors and given the impact of efficiency, conservation, and net metering, to name three things that are having a significant impact on reducing demand in New England. So, having seen projects go forward the way these have with so little meaningful public input, it is too legalistic, it is too expensive, it discourages participation. People don't know how to participate, they don't understand it. And I think it's just a fundamentally difficult and unfair process. It's really very undemocratic. So we propose in the bill to assess these issues, to look at the process, the Act 250 process in particular, as to how people can meaningfully participate in decisions that lead to this kind of activity. And so that is a big part of the beginning of the bill. There are also these provisions to assess what does large renewable projects really do to advance a process for a cleaner and more green environment. And I think most people are in favor of that, but there's some serious questions here as to whether we're even doing that with industrial wind. And without prejudging it from my own perspective, I'd like to know the truth. And the way to get to the truth is to have a process in place now when we do these assessments. And I think the moratorium is more than reasonable before we build projects all over the place with big tax credits that didn't fall over the cliff that are being used by foreign rich corporations to develop Vermont. So hopefully this bill will be introduced, I believe, next week. There will be a lot of sponsors, and it will get, I trust, the leadership in the legislature in both houses will see to it that it receives a fair hearing. I would point out, if it was up to me, I would hear from everybody we could possibly hear from. I don't care what their positions are or where they live or whatever, have any connection to this issue whatsoever, should be heard, should be considered. And that would be a different process than what's been going on so far in the permitting of these projects. So that is the goal of the legislature, I'm sure, and should be, because it's up to the legislature to protect Vermonters. That's our job. And we try to do it as best we can, and we start out by being sure that everybody gets heard, that we gather the evidence. And I would ask that those who do a lot of testimony about this, and that's good, that that's carefully and honestly and clearly and transparently and understandably prepared, so that we know what we're doing when we go forward, no matter how this turns out. That we have a couple of years here to figure this out in a proper fashion and go forward for our state in a proper way. That means, yes, we use less oil. Yes, we have an even cleaner environment, not that we don't have the best in the eastern U.S. already, we do, but we can continue to make a contribution. But there are a lot of issues here that need to be assessed. I would add one thing I didn't mention. There's a lot of trading going on of renewable energy credits.
Yes, right.
And we have a tendency to trade the good stuff for the bad. And when you look at the carbon footprint, that's going to be an issue that needs to be assessed in this process. It's how many trees do you take out of Vermont before you have a negative effect? And what kind of RECs, as we call them, are we trading? Are we buying somebody else's brown RECs in exchange for our green ones? And there's been a lot of very loose talk about that. And we are going to tighten up the talk a little and get to what is really the truth about it, wherever that leads. I always believe that the things most important about this and really big issues is let the truth come out and let it take us where it's going to take us. But right now, we're not on that path. We're on a confusing, disjointed, non-participatory, undemocratic path that will never get us to the truth about the whole thing.
CLF on all of this too.
I neglected to mention a couple of things. One is that the bill that many of you have picked up off the table is about 40 pages long. There is, along with that, a summary of about 6 pages and a table of citations from which the research that we've been doing has been taken from. It's appearing in the bill. There's also some photographs of what you see up here. I hope that every member of the press was able to get a copy of that. If you haven't, let me know and I'll try to see what I can do. I think that's going to do it. We are happy to answer any questions that you may have.